Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unfiltered Vet Discussions. Today, we are being joined by Phil and Cody and Jenny, and myself is Kelly. You can see us on unfilteredvetdiscussions.com. You can like us, share, comment on the posts. We are on YouTube as well as various podcast platforms. So today we are going to be tackling a discussion that is very keen on most people's minds because the hurricane just blew through the eastern coastal region of the United States. And we all have been impacted by this in one way or the other. And we just want to help bring awareness to the situation. So Phil is literally is in Florida, so he has a Florida perspective. I have employees who are in Eastern Tennessee and right in the ranges of North Carolina, and they have family members who are doing searches up in the mountains right now for other humans. Cody has perspective from an international point of view, and Jenny, we didn't get a chance to talk beforehand, but I know you know people, so I'm sure you definitely have a perspective about this. So we're going to open up, and I'm going to start by saying, and we'll end with this too, is some call to action for you all is don't forget this happened. If this is not in your area, be aware that it has happened to people. And the veterinary space is very large, but very small at the same time. So we all know people or directly who have had gone through or going through this experience. So I'm going to open it up to the rest of the team here on Unfiltered Vet Discussions, just to kind of let's talk about what we know first and what's coming out of the woodwork. So Cody, from an international perspective, what's being said that you know or don't know?
Well, almost nothing. And I have been looking into it. So, as Canadians, just so you guys know, we're obsessed with our big brother to the south. We probably know more about US politics than we know about Canadian politics. We check out the US weather, we look at the US stock markets, all of our media is talking about things that are going on in America. So I very much am in tune to that. And in my morning coffee, I check out various news organizations. I won't give you my opinion on what I think of MSNBC or Fox and on, but I like to check out Al Jazeera. I like to check out Reuters. Like I pride myself on keeping up to date on world events. And I'm hearing some boots on the ground stuff that's going on from friends down in the US. And there's almost nothing. And I'm actively looking for any sort of articles. And it's like almost radio silence. Like, certainly, we're hearing a lot about what's going on with Iran. Certainly, we're hearing a lot what's going on in Gaza. Certainly, we're hearing lots of what's going on in the Ukraine. But this is very strange to me. And I guess one like personal note, and it just for me is Asheville, North Carolina. So Peter and I are supposed to be speaking there at the beginning of November. There's I don't know what it's called, the Old Smoky Veterinary Conference, and Peter and myself and Dr. Dan Markwalder are going to spend 2 days talking about practice management and practice leadership and de novo startup and all these fun things. So I've been kind of keeping my eye on Asheville, and like it's wiped out. And if you weren't looking for it, you would never know. There's no reporting on it. So like that's wild to me. Why is that the case?
Great question. Let's move to Phil. Phil, what was it like? What is it like in your?
Yeah, it's so I think, one thing from a perspective that's interesting, going through this, and I'm one of the biggest few folks that, I was born in Florida, I was raised in Florida, and I'm still in Florida. Is that when hurricanes come through, especially when they're going to be significant, is there's this weird thing that I think every Floridian can relate to, and that is about a day in, so there can be a wobble, you see it online and you see this huge storm, but like the real impact is usually going to be in the northeast corner of the storm. Like that's where the best, so it matters where it makes landfall. And you're watching the tracking, and it's like there's this instant, oh, it's not going to hit us. And then it's, oh God, it's going to hit it, it's going to hit somebody. And it's just this kind of horrible feeling that I think everybody who's gone through hurricanes understands. This particular one, the thing that was challenging is, so I'm just northeast of Tampa, probably about 30 miles, and from Clearwater, which is about 30 minutes south of us, all the way up to the Big Bend where it hit, got record storm surge. So that's just where the storm just picks up the sea and just dumps it, onto land. And the storm was 100 miles off coast about from Tampa, and just our coastal communities got hit so hard, and a lot of people didn't evacuate because the storm it really wasn't even going to come close to us. And we all see it. And I think it's one thing seeing this devastation on TV, but then being on Facebook and being on social media and knowing that this friend's house is gone, and that everybody in their neighborhood's house is gone, and the level of devastation, and then knowing that that's happening all up and down the coast, that it's almost overwhelming to that. And we're about 10 miles inland, so we didn't see any of the surge or anything. And I guess it's seeing that level, like in the US, where you have this level of devastation where everything just comes to a halt. Like there's no, everything we were used to, when you're going through one of those, there's no power, water, like you're not going to the grocery store. It is a fundamental shift in what day-to-day life is like. And seeing everybody start to adjust to that is really impactful. And I guess having gone through that with a couple big storms, it's something that doesn't get covered. I mean, you see this stuff, but seeing it like go on for a week or two, like initially even trying to get water and food, and then second phase of trying to rebuild, and third phase of policy changes and things like that. It's a lot. I guess I don't know that that's clarifying as much. It's just a lot of feelings, and actually we, as of today, I know there's another system that's right, it was right in the same area as Helene. I don't know where, I haven't looked this morning, but we're probably going to get hit by something else like in the next week. I don't know if it's going to be, that significant, but it's just, damn, it's like, it's a lot. I will say the other thing is that as horrible as this is and as impactful as this is, one of the things that we do see, and Kelly and I know we've talked about this, is you start to see the neighbors helping neighbors. The things you don't see on the news is you don't see everybody grabbing everything they can, like going down and just packing water up or packing whatever, and just trying to be of assistance and not overwhelming people. Having we've got our 3 clinics. I mean, we're busting at the seams. We've got as many dogs and cats and animals as we can, getting them in, for people. And like our clinics, I mean, not that it, but everybody's doing this. Like our clinics are going out to go help one of the, the communities that got washed out, today, and just bringing them dog food and toiletries and just anything we can to try to be of service. And so seeing that on a ground level is heartening, is just seeing neighbors helping neighbors. And I don't know that gets some press, but, seeing that happen, on a day-to-day basis, an hour by hour basis here is it adds some humanity, that there's some hope for who we are, when these kind of things happen. So anyhow.
Phil, wait a second. Cody.
Yeah.
Phil, I think, so I'm in Minnesota, right? Smack dab in the center of the state. And Minnesotans, a lot of them don't leave the state of Minnesota. So
Yeah.
they just don't. So they don't know, like we get snowstorms, but we don't get hurricanes, right? So one of the questions we get here is, why are there so many animals left behind?
Yeah.
Why are there so many animals that need to be rescued? Like, because we don't understand, like people in the middle of the United States
Mm,
cope with different type of weather issues.
yeah.
Do you have an answer to that?
A little
Or?
bit. I mean, a little bit. So what I would say is, again, being somebody who's lived in Florida my whole life is, we used to, tongue in cheek joke that really, if it wasn't over a category 3, we didn't pay it any mind. It was, and to give you an idea, I worked in Michigan for a year. Our CEO told me, one day he's like, "Hey, congratulations, it's your first snow day." And I was like, "Oh, I'm like, do I come into work? Like, I don't, like, I didn't, I'm from Florida. I don't know what that means." He's like, "Yeah, you come into work." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, it's like a tropical storm warning, like trying to equate it to what we would do. And so I don't know that I wouldn't use the word arrogance in any way, but if you've been here that long, the power of these storms is increasing, not to be like, I don't know about exponentially, but they're significantly more category 3, category 4, category 5 storms than, we've seen, in the past. And so you get used to, well, I'm not leaving the house, like I'm not leaving. And I think that's still to some degree, but we did have a lot of people evacuate, but we didn't know. I just don't know that we knew, because it was going to track so far west of us, that people just didn't think that they had to get out. Because we think about storm surge, but we think about it when the storm's coming right at us. This one was just skirting the coast. So that's one thing. And two is just, where do I go? The hotels have to take animals now. They've passed some policies, but not all shelters do. So not all the shelters take animals. And so there's a limited amount of, options too. And then, we had clients that they just couldn't catch their cats. It's like I mean, we know how cats are, and they had to get out. And so sometimes there's that, that situation. It's just tragic. I mean, I think assuming best intent, is that people weren't, just saying, screw my animals, like I'm leaving. Like, there are usually reasons for that are challenging. And I'm just glad that I haven't had to be in that position to make that decision as far as my animals go. I don't know if that helped, Kelly.
It did, because
Yeah.
people just don't know, like, because your boots on the ground,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And we all know our own geographical area. We all know how to manage theoretically our geographical area, but when
Yeah.
it's so different, we don't understand. Like in North Carolina, all the roads in Western North Carolina are closed. All are closed. And then, like my teammate said, "Kelly, you don't understand. A lot of people, they're so poor up there, so many of them,
Mhm. Yeah.
that they live in these hollers and they live in these canyons and they build their own bridges to go over
Mhm.
streams. And so we don't even know they're living up there, and cell phones don't work. They didn't work real well up
Yeah.
there in the first place, right? So how do you, like, but that's their way of life. That's what they know. I didn't even
Yeah.
knew that was a thing until we started talking about it at work today. Like, oh, tell me more about that. How do those people live? How can we help those people? Right? I don't know. Um, so Jenni, from your point of view, what do you know about the hurricane or people you have?
So, can you hear me?
Yep.
No.
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, you got me? Okay. I'm trying to log on my computer too to see if that works. So what I know about the hurricane, we always watch the hurricanes coming up from Florida because a lot of them turn into nor'easters for us, right? Like they come up the coast. Obviously, they don't hit us by the time they get up to us, they're a tropical storm. And so we pay attention to it as far as that is concerned. And nor'easters can get pretty bad for us. Not quite this early, but later on, we get a lot of ice storms. The first year that we were open, we actually lost power. Oh, here we go. Hold on. Getting out.
And she'll be back.
And so we
Nope.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Am I here?
Mhm.
Okay. So we lost power for a full week the first year that I was open. And we had to move animals into our house because we had wood stoves in there to keep them warm. The year before that, we had big floods come through here after a nor'easter. And, so when we opened our practice, we started working with our town to figure out how can we, you talked about the animals being left behind. How can we help in that situation? When the floods happened a few years before the ice storm, barns were gone and people had and it was just everybody was just trying to get the horses out, and same thing, right? You can't catch your cat, and it's awful. So when we moved into our facility and when we increased our size, I reached out to the welfare director in our town and said, okay, in the case this happens again, what can we do to help? Can we be considered a facility that can house people and animals? Which actually is what we figured out we could do. We could move cots here. We're at a high ground, but we could move cots here. People could keep their dogs and cats here. We have, stalls for horses, so we could do that. But we made a plan in place in the case of a flood or people not having power for a long period of time. We have a generator that can last 2 weeks, so we really set ourselves up as an emergency facility for people with animals. And I think that's something. I actually went to a talk once on this, and it got me thinking, how many vet clinics are prepared for an influx of patients, have the capability to hold animals? Like, these are things that we need to think about, even in the case that, okay, hurricanes hit the South, that happens there. I grew up in Ohio. We knew tornadoes happened on a regular basis. Cody, I have no idea what happens in Canada except for snow. But emergencies earthquakes, I mean, these things are starting to happen more and more. And even though we don't want to think about it, we should think about not just how do we take care of our team and what do we do about that, but how do we take care of our communities? What can we do to help? Phil, you talked about driving pet food, to places, and, we usually have a plethora of blankets that could be used. But I think it's something that every business owner, practice manager, team, work with your team and say, hey guys, how do you think we can do this? Maybe it's a small strip mall practice that doesn't have a lot of kennel space, but you know, people in the pet food industry, people, maybe you can work with other, veterinary clinics that don't have power, and you can help them fill their prescription for animals that are, like, we don't think about all the heart patients, all the patients that need care regularly. If a clinic is out, washed away, how do their patients get taken care of? So it's just stuff to think about and to have in place. That's my 2 cents.
And just anybody that's listening, I do want to chime in because this is important, because a dear friend of mine, Dr. Terry Klekus, he's the chair of the FEMA's disaster committee. So that guy's got his roller skates on right now. But hearing what goes on, it's not the desire to give. It's that often, like, we could even say, hey, let's pack up all our gear and go down there and help animals. And it's like, it can cause chaos. So it's important too, is that if we want to give, is that also knowing in a lot of these situations, there are organizations that are, seeing the level of organization from a local, county, state communication, all of that area is, check with your state organization. Like, if you're call your state VMA, or the vet school usually has somebody set up specifically if you want to do that, because they can help. But I know Terry was telling me, like, when Michael came through a number of years ago, they just ended up having like an RV full of a bunch of stuff that people donated, and it was difficult to distribute it. And now they have better channels to be able to do that. So it's not the lack of people wanting to give. It's what, what infrastructure is in place. So that's what I would say, just knowing some of the people that are working on the other side of that, is call and see how your help would most be effective, and know that if you may not be familiar with things that are on the ground, but that I can almost guarantee that there are systems on the ground, to tell you where your help would be most effective.
And that's why, yeah, when we reached out to our welfare coordinator and I said, in this, if this were a situation, what could we do? How can we help? And you're right, that makes a huge difference. The other thing I'm going to put my little soapbox on: donate blood. I donate plasma every month. And I just feel that that's one of those things. I know some people, there's a lot of, I'm not giving money to the Red Cross. Fine, don't. But you can always donate blood, even for those of us who don't like needles.
Is there and I'm ignorant this, a system for animals to donate blood? Is it?
We have that in Canada quite frequently. My clinic runs a blood donor clinic, so we'll get
Good.
15 animals in. It's a completely separate organization. It's all volunteer based. We have a veterinarian in. Our clients bring their pets in. There's a criteria, and yeah, we do that quite often.
I'd say each state is, in the US is, it may be a little different. So what's good is some of the bigger emergency facilities will have a blood bank. We're lucky. We've got a couple of Great Danes. So they're like kegs. I mean, you can just tap them. I mean, I can't tell you how many dogs, Max, our one of our technicians, Great Danes, is saved. So if you have a Great Dane, like, definitely take advantage of that. But it is a fair question. It's a little different system, and it's hard sometimes too to make. Well, I mean, Cody can speak to it. I know our local emergency hospital that had the blood bank, they ended up having to shut down. It was just hard for them to, keep the costs and those types of things, and not to squirrel too much on that. But the answer is yes. But that most clinics either have blood donors, in-house, or they do have access. Most of the vet schools will have a blood bank that you can access. And I know Veg, in our area was trying to start one, but yeah.
Jenni, have you noticed any supply chain disruption? So this was one question that I was trying to figure out, veterinary specific. Have the distribution channels been affected at all? I know some of the, main areas, that are kind of central locations for some of the distribution, even things like supply chain disruption for reference laboratories, right? Like a company like LA Diagnostics, right, is sending blood samples all over the place. Have you noticed anything in terms of being able to get supplies, get vaccines? I even think about, pet food delivery companies, large pet pharma companies. Like there must be some level of impact. Is there pharmaceutical manufacturing that's been impacted? Just nothing. I haven't heard anything at all.
With this particular storm, I have not seen anything yet. We have run into it. I know, how many years ago was that big hurricane that hit Puerto Rico? And that was where a lot of our fluids came from. Then we couldn't get fluids. And then when we could, the price was ungodly, So I have seen it with other storms. A lot of us being in the Northeast, we have a lot of our supply chain is already up near us, like New York, Pennsylvania. So we don't tend to see those things until the blizzards start hitting. That's when we see a lot of supply chain issues. The flights won't leave for FedEx or UPS, that are, or the trucks can't get out, or, those types of things. But a lot of what we use in the Northeast doesn't necessarily come from the South. But I do remember a few years ago when we couldn't get fluids because I think it was one of the Abbott plants, or where they got a lot of their fluids from. It was something like that, and the plant was just wiped out. And so then we couldn't get anything, and then all the people that did have it were like, oh, let's profit a little bit more from this. Supply and demand, economics 101.
And On top of the hurricane, Cody, with supply chains, is the strike in the United States for the longshoremen. You know, that is 35
Yeah,
ports from
yeah,
all on the eastern coast around Florida on out. And, so just throw that in the mix and stir.
yeah.
Along with the other storm coming. So, it's a little interesting right now.
Yeah.
So
even
But
even locally for Phil's hospitals or just surrounding hospitals, right? Even if you're left standing, if everything is not flooded out and clean and safe, and you can only operate for a couple of days if those trucks are running, right?
well, and what was interesting too was, and when Irma came through in 2017 in Florida's, that one hit almost all of Florida, and and just about everybody was out of power. But what was interesting was the access to fuel. Is that we couldn't get fuel trucks down here, and I remember it was just an unbelievable scene. You would see Florida Highway Patrols, like they were escorting the fuel tank because nobody could get gas, and that was a big big thing because we didn't have any power either. And so they actually, and this is where I say, like, then the policy comes through, and now in Florida, I think if you have 8 pumps or more or something, like you have to have a generator on site, because we could get the fuel, but we couldn't, then we were getting the fuel, but you didn't have the power to run the pumps. And so it was it's just interesting, to your point, I think, Cody, is that we start seeing like the second and third tier effects
Yeah.
of the impact. Yeah.
Well, even just thinking, we're us practice managers, right? We're continually trying to streamline our inventory so we're not sitting on a bunch of shrinkage. But if those delivery trucks don't show up every day, we can't do medicine for very long.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah, I
think
know.
we saw a lot of that with COVID. I remember people started trying to breed and we couldn't get semen shipped in because by the time one time it came in, it was warm. And it's like, well, that's not going to do us any good. And FedEx was, sorry. So I think we did see a lot of the supply chain issues when COVID hit. It wasn't even a natural disaster, it was the pandemic, but it just shows how fragile I think the whole system is, and how we really need to be prepared, not over prepared, but definitely not under prepared. To just be aware that these things can happen at any time. And you're right, Cody. Like, there were things that we couldn't do because we couldn't get anything. We couldn't get our medications delivered on time. We couldn't get our vaccines delivered on time. And so it's tough. It's a juggling match, right? That we all have to deal with.
So the takeaway today, because we're at that time, is 1, going to Phil's point of view. If you want to help, just don't show up. Call somebody, find out how you can be the most effective, right? Number 2, if you want to donate money, vet the source first. There's a lot of pranksters, a lot of scam artists out there. Go through an organization you love and trust, and that may be different for all of us. So I'm not going to give specific ones. Local organizations can even be better. If you know somebody boots on the ground who can say, yeah, this place here is really stepping up, I would suggest donating to this place. That might be a place to look, right? So do that. Another thing to do is don't forget, like, this is an ongoing rolling scenario. As Phil said, there's 3 different levels. We're still in level number 1. They're still trying to find people. My daughter's teacher, Spanish teacher, still has a family member who's missing, and she lives in Minnesota and that person's missing in North Carolina. So just because you're not there doesn't mean somebody doesn't know somebody who isn't there or who isn't here. Like, where is that person, right? So be aware of that and keep awareness up and find information, look on socials, share information where you can, because this is a national event. This isn't a local event. And then to Jenni's point and Cody's point, what are your own plans? Because stuff happens in your own area. If it's not a hurricane, there's something else that will roll through, happen, or whatever. Are you ready for it? Do you want to work with the city like Jenny, who like went the whole distance and became a shelter and has a generator that runs for 2 weeks? How do you want to live today as a hospital? What do you want to provide to your community? And are you ready to do the provisions for that? And that's an internal discussion. That might be a good one to have, right? Anybody else want to add any other thoughts before we wrap up today?
I just want to shout out to my wife, like literally as we're having this, she's there now. And she just said that one of our US senators and the sheriff actually were at the same place where she's giving out, and they stopped over. They actually took pictures with them, but that just, that they're giving out cat litter and, and food and just some of the things that, again, they checked out and they were specifically in a spot to be of service in that way. And I think it's just that and hundreds of thousands of people are doing the same thing that she's doing, but it's just, it's beautiful to, to see us coming together in those situations. So anyway, just, I'm grateful my wife is doing good work.
That is so awesome, Phil. And
Yeah.
it's grateful that humans can actually bond and care about each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. Until another episode of Unfiltered Vet Discussions, we wish you well. Talk to you soon.